Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show.
Learning to read Braille has enormous benefits. Literacy is a good thing. What about the flip side, though? What about typing Braille? Is it time for modern Braillers to embrace different kinds of keyboards, maybe even the QWERTY keyboard? Stephen Scott is one of the hosts of Double Tap, and he has some thoughts on this. Hey, good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Dave. How are you today?
I am well, Stephen. This requires a little bit of context. Why is this on your mind?
So it's an interesting one. Now, I know you're not a Braille user.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
You're not alone.
I've got enough vision that I've never needed Braille.
Yeah, and also it's really important to say that the number of people who actually use Braille is really low. The number of blind people who use it is really low, and the number of low vision people who use it is even lower than that. So that's the first thing to put out there. And I'm not saying this is directly attributable to it, but I think that it's all about the learning and the process sometimes with Braille. Now, a lot of people who are older don't tend to learn Braille because they lose the sensitivity in their fingers. So they don't feel literally the dots, and they can't therefore enjoy or get the benefit out of Braille, even though it could possibly help them out. But I think there's another question here, and it came up through my own learning in Braille, that the actual keyboard input method that you use for Braille and for learning is called the Perkins-style keyboard. And if anybody's seen a Braille display or a Braille device, usually the Perkins Brailler, which is a classic Brailler, it's like an old mechanical typewriter. It has 6 keys on it. Actually, it has a number more than that. It's also got a space bar, and it's got 2 keys on the other side. But, you know, it's got 6 input keys to actually type. And those 6 keys represent the 6 individual dots on the Braille code. Now, for learning and for learning to type Braille in order to write it and read it back, you need to understand how those two link together, right? It helps you understand the code in the same way that, for example, taking a pen and writing the letter A will help you understand the layout of the letter A so that you can read the word. And that's essentially the same deal here. My issue is that in 2023, most of us, when we type Braille today, we're typing into a computer or a smartphone or something else. And what are we more likely to use in these situations? QWERTY keyboards, the standard keyboard that is on every PC, every laptop, every single smartphone screen. So why do we use a different input keyboard method for Braille in 2023?
Stephen, you have to forgive my ignorance. Again, as someone who doesn't use a Brailler, I have observed people using them, and it looked pretty interesting the way in which you're hammering away at the Brailler using those 6 keys, those 6 input keys. So what benefit would that QWERTY keyboard offer? What's the practicality of bringing that into the Brailler universe?
So if you're using a Braille input keyboard, that Perkins-style 6-dot input, then what you're actually doing is you're typing out exactly what is represented on the page, whether it be on screen or on actual paper. You're printing out the Braille code. Now, the reason that it's so preferred and so chosen by so many blind people is because of what's called Grade 2 Braille. Grade 1 Braille is your average letters and your punctuation. So learning the alphabet, learning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, learning all the, full stop, all the punctuation and all of that. Grade 2 moves you on to what's called contracted Braille. And that's exactly what you think it might be. It's where you've taken a word, for example, and instead of having 3 letters, T-H-E for the, you've shrunk that all down to the letter T, and that becomes the word the. So when you think about it, if you're able to contract Braille, it means on that line of Braille you have, you can get so many more words, which makes you able to read faster. And in turn, using that Braille input allows you to type faster. But my argument is, if Braille is all about literacy, then really you should be typing the full word out like we all do. That would help keep up your literacy. If you're short coding your way through life, that's great. But if someone says, well, how did you actually spell that word out loud? You might not know, and that actually, I think, harms literacy. So I wonder if perhaps we should kill 2 birds with 1 stone here and actually think about the input method as being something that's more traditional today, as opposed to maybe 50 years ago when it was necessary for you to learn this method of input because you were actually printing out Braille on paper. Now you're not. You're using a different type of method. You're using a computer, you're using a smartphone. So for that, you would require something that is easier to input into. And also, let's not forget, we're not just typing on a computer. You know, what if I want to Control-C or Control-V to copy and paste something? How do I do that on a Braille device? Now, it can be done, but you need lots and lots of new commands you have to learn. So you're having to learn two systems to do the same thing. Ultimately, it feels like we've kind of reinvented the wheel on this one.
Okay, so Stephen, as I sort of put the pieces together here and utilize the Socratic method from thesis and antithesis, we've reached a synthesis here, which is what you're doing is you're changing the input, but keeping the output. You're maintaining the output of Braille, but you're changing the way it's input in a way that might actually make it more beneficial for everybody, because then it means if I want to put something in Braille for somebody, it's easy for me to use a modern Brailler and send that off because I know how to type on the keyboard.
That's right. And if I was to learn to type Braille today, and I type ASDF on a keyboard, and I understand that what comes up on that display will be ASDF, and I have to learn what that means in terms of the reading aspect of it, that's going to be much more, well, I think, for me anyway, I think much more understandable. You know, this came because when I was learning Braille, I was told to focus on the reading rather than the writing. And I found that quite interesting because you would think you need both. But some people have this viewpoint that actually, as long as you've got the reading part right, you can worry about the writing later. And I would argue that with the QWERTY keyboard, you don't need to worry too much about the writing at all because you're kind of doing it with that keyboard. So I'm not suggesting for a second we change everything tomorrow, but I think we do need to think about the future of Braille. We also have to think about a growing number of people who might want to learn Braille in later life. For those who are born blind, for those who go through education, for those who use this in everyday work, in particular for shorthand, it should very much remain as is. And a lot of people find value in that. But I think there's a serious conversation to be had about the type of devices that are on sale, which are very expensive today. Is there a way of perhaps creating something cheaper that is more, you know, for example, like an actual wrist, if you think about a wrist rest type device, but that just as a display with Braille on it, and then you could sit that next to any keyboard you have. You don't have to spend extra money on a specific keyboard for your Braille input. We've all got a keyboard we like and love. We might use a laptop we're comfortable with. Just add that line of Braille at the bottom, and you're good to go. That's my theory.
Stephen, you've sold me, but I'm not necessarily a party that is influenced too much by the outcome here. It won't change my life in a radical way. But I'm curious, generally speaking, how radical is this idea? How much hate mail am I going to receive at feedback at AMI.ca this afternoon?
Well, we started getting feedback already on this. We talked about it on Tuesday's show. We're discussing it today again. And I have to tell you, you know, our audience here at AMI, they are wonderful, as you know, and they are always very interested, very intelligent audience, and beautiful as well.
Oh, yes. We have the best looking audience of all time.
You can always tell that through email, can't you?
Yeah, clearly.
So, you know, but honestly, you know, I've got some really interesting feedback already from people who are saying, you know, I can really hear where you're coming from with this, but they're also laying out the argument as to why that original system exists and why it should continue. And I think that's important in this. I just want to start a discussion which lets companies think about new ideas. It's not so much, I guess my outcome here, my ideal outcome would be not to change the existing offering, but to actually come up with a third level of offering. Instead of a Braille display with a Perkins input or a Braille display with a QWERTY input, actually a Braille display that stands alone, that I can just literally take anywhere with me, pull out of my bag, have with me, any size, anywhere, and I can just plonk it in front of my laptop when I'm using my laptop out and about, or I can use it anywhere else. I think we have to think about how we can make Braille more accessible to more people and at lower cost. It starts with education. At younger age, that is really important. It's something I fight about all the time, and I will forever. It's a hill I will die on. I want more children. I want every child who is young, who is at school, who is low vision, to learn Braille and computer input, and you know, using speech and Zoom and all that stuff. I want them to learn everything. I want them to use those brains and soak up everything at a young age, because you never know when you might need this tool. The argument that was made to me was, you've got vision, you don't need this. You've got low vision, you can manage with speech. And here I am several years on, and I'm in a position where I really could have done with having that Braille knowledge. I could have really done with it. And that needs to change in education. But for those of us who are in the position where we're learning now, it needs to be more accessible from a cost level and from a training level. That's my case.
Stephen, that's a case well made. Thank you for taking the time to make it today.
I salute you, Dave, and all you stand for. And by the way, I know you were impressed with dribbling earlier. If you want to see real dribbling, you should come to my house at 6 a.m.
Well done. Well done on the way out. A little levity on the way out. That is free thinker and noted radical Stephen Scott, one of the hosts of Double Tap, which you can find daily, noon Eastern time on AMI Audio. You can find the Double Tap team on Twitter at Double Tap On Air.
Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI.TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI.TV or download the podcasts wherever you listen.